Crusader Kings 3 is a brilliant game. I've played over 1,500 hours and I once streamed it for 30 hours straight. It better be brilliant. But the things that we love are often the things that we hold to the highest standard. I hold CK3 to the highest of all standards in my gaming library. Over the years of Paradox Gaming, I've spent a lot of time thinking about and analyzing mechanics with a particular emphasis on what's fun in these games. When I play CK3, I find myself wishing for certain mechanics which are often unspecified or poorly thought out. I seek to end that lack of specificity with this video right here. I'm going to outline exactly, and with specificity, most of the changes and additions to CK3 that I believe would make it a better game. I'm also going to organize those changes into little packages that pertain to a certain theme, or a DLC we might call it. For example, there will be a section on changes for Liege-Vassal relations, a section on interactions between monarchs of different realms, and so on. I'm doing this to help give you an idea of a way to construct the DLC, essentially. You never know if the devs are watching, so please steal my ideas, Paradox. I don't care if I get no credit, I just want the game to be better. We're going to present these ideas in the form of what I believe are reasonably sized DLCs. That's where some of us may disagree, but I'm hoping that the majority of the player base think of these ideas as beneficial and substantive enough to be worth paying for. I'm doing my best to avoid issues like overcomplication, or changing the game into not having the spirit of CK3. One thing I dislike is people who come into CK3 and try to make it into EU4 or Civ or other strategy games. CK3's identity is unique and ought to be preserved. I'm going into my changes with that philosophy in mind. Let's start with what I feel would be the most impactful of changes: Vassal and Liege relations. So, what are the problems with the current Vassal-Liege relationship mechanics? Essentially, as a vassal, I mostly feel as if my liege has no actual influence in my realm in any meaningful way. The only time I've felt bothered by having a liege is when they're religiously converting my realm, trying to imprison me, which I then either refuse and destroy in a war, or accept and then promptly break out, or when they accept popular rebel demands forcing me to lose land. It often feels like the personality, the whims, and the demands of my liege are like a breeze in the wind which I can bat away at an instant. This is mostly owing to the fact that I have more military power than the king, which, to be fair, when that isn't the case, makes them feel a little more consequential. After refusing the 40th educate child request from the king though, I start to feel that even as a weak vassal, this is all kind of pointless. To sum that up, the relationship between liege and vassal feels empty. The king sometimes is a pain, but usually isn't, and often can be completely ignored. When the king is a pain, it often feels stupid as opposed to dramatic. I want to talk about paying homage. This was a mechanic added in the Royal Court DLC, and which I was extremely excited for, only for it to promptly be the greatest waste of a mechanic in the whole DLC. For the uninitiated, paying homage is when a vassal appears before the king with a gift to show their loyalty. The gift is usually money, a hook, or a contract change. As the player, I never click this button, because all I have to gain is a little bit of prestige at best, and I can lose so much. I may lose money, I may give a hook, I may embarrass myself in the court. There are all kinds of problems that can happen. The benefits for paying homage are almost meaningless, if not entirely non-existent, and the penalties for a bad homage payment are a little meaningful. The AI often pays homage to their liege, giving either nothing or money. I've never seen the AI give a hook or a contract increase. Paying homage is a really good idea, to be honest, but the way it was implemented was so awful that it actually, in my opinion, takes away from the game by just adding busy work to click through as a king, and a decision that only sabotages you as a vassal. Here's what I want from pay homage as a way to make it interesting. Let the personalities of the interacting parties come out in these visits that sets the tone between the relations of those lords. They say first impressions are everything, and when paying homage, this essentially is the first impression between king and vassal. If the king is diligent and the vassal is lazy, the king might demand that all his titles be read, something like,
"In the name of Robert of the House Baratheon, the first of his name, King of the Andals and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm." While
the vassal wants to say something more like,
"Eddard of House Stark, titles.
Now we check another personality trait on the king. Maybe the king is wrathful, so he locks the vassal up for his insolence and gets himself some tyranny and dread. Maybe the king is forgiving, so he simply lets it go. Maybe the king is greedy, so he levies a new tax on all lords who fail to state his entire title properly. Maybe he's a lunatic, so he cuts out the vassal's tongue as a form of compassion. Now that vassal doesn't have to say any part of the title. What a nice guy, my goodness. Every vassal of the realm will react to these decisions differently at a personal level, and then there'd be a reputational influence. For example, a fellow wrathful vassal might cheer on the king for not letting that lazy vassal get away with his insolence. At the same time though, the king is garnering a reputation for being a bit of a hothead. This reputation can be represented as a character modifier that appears if enough decisions are taken that reflect that reputation. Remember what I said about first impressions? I believe that these opening moves as a king should essentially last for the entirety of their rulership, barring a huge change in rulership style, simply because the first impressions of a king echo throughout the realm. one rash decision can drastically affect the king's reputation. Let's take a look at the vassal now. How they present themselves and what gifts they provide can mean a whole lot for their perception amongst other vassals, and the way the king and queen will treat them. A vassal who pays very little homage may face the same fate as the aforementioned lazy vassal, or perhaps that vassal knows the new king is weak, setting themselves up for a power grab. I'd like to imagine that a greedy vassal might come in paying a measly homage, and being punished for it by the king in some small way. Not every punishment needs to be this huge affair. Something simple like a duke being stripped of the title Master of the Hunt because they failed to bring in enough gold. A greedy vassal would probably not care all that much since they got away with paying a small homage, only at the cost of a prestige-oriented title. Meanwhile, an arrogant vassal in the same situation would be outraged to lose that title. Let's zoom out a little from these specific cases and talk about bloat though. Right now what I'm describing is far too complicated to put into the game as is. I'm getting into specifics now as to how to exactly implement what I'd like to see. I've given you the theory of the interaction, here's how it would look. King Richard of England dies and is succeeded by his heir, King Charles of England. King Charles is just, impatient, and honest. All direct vassals of King Charles get access to the pay homage decision. They have 1 year to click this button before it disappears. Not clicking this button within a year is a crime, leaving you open to legal imprisonment. Think of it like being assumed that if you don't pay homage, you don't submit your fealty to the king, which is a crime of course. Let's look at Duke William of Northumbria. He is honest, lustful, and sadistic. Duke William of Northumbria clicks the pay homage button. An event pops up asking the Duke what he wants to bring to the homage. There are 4 options: small gift, big gift, no gift, and then something more creative. Think of the pilgrimage event where it pops up with an option to see more options. I think this is acceptable, although we can't do it too much because otherwise it gets bloated, but 1 or 2 is fine. Gifts are just money, but hitting more creative gifts pops up another event with 4 more options: an artifact, a hook, a contract increase, or back to previous options. I believe this is pretty simple and does not bloat the game, at least it doesn't bloat it enough to be a problem. After picking the gift option, another event comes up asking how the vassal wants to present themselves. There are 4 options: formal, casual, and then 2 more that are based on personality. In this case, Duke William can use honest to openly criticize the king. What the criticism is will be flavor and randomly selected based on a myriad of stuff. For example, if the court grandeur is low, then the criticism is that the royal halls are dusty. That's the kind of thing that the writers can think of more so than this. The other option is for lustful, which has the Duke commenting that the king's wife looks really hot or something. If William is homosexual, he comments on the king's look, and if he's bisexual, who the comment is directed towards is random. If the king has no wife, the comment goes towards a random courtier or a vassal who is female. Each of these choices gives the vassal a temporary reputation modifier based on how the king reacts to it. A formal introduction is the safest one, which always gives a simple liege opinion plus modifier and something small like 0.5 prestige per month. A casual introduction could either go very well and create a friendship between the king and the vassal, or at least an opinion increase, or it could get the vassal to lose prestige for being humiliated by the king over a lack of formality. Other vassals will react appropriately according to their prestige, and might see the casual nature of the interaction as spitting on tradition, or might see it as brown-nosing, and so on. The last 2 options are where it gets fun. If William comes in and critiques King Charles' clothes using his honest trait, Charles, as an honest king, will probably appreciate that and gain some opinion of William. William may gain a positive reputation modifier that increases diplomacy but decreases his intrigue, along with some prestige. At this point, the gift is presented, and the king will react to the gift. Because King Charles is just, he will accept basically any gift as long as Duke William gives his vows as a vassal. If King Charles were to express his discontent with the gift, he could simply sully relations between himself and William, or seek to punish William, taking on tyranny according to the punishment relative to the gift. Let's say Duke William brought in a large gift. King Charles gets an event with 3 options and a special 4th option that only some personalities get. One accepts the gift, increasing relations bilaterally. The other is unhappy with the gift, but keeps it, harming relations bilaterally. The third is unhappy with the gift, giving it back and imposing a punishment. The 4th option would be for greedy, arbitrary, or arrogant characters, and perhaps other traits, but especially these 3, which is unhappy with the gift, keeps the gift, and punishes the vassal. If punishment is chosen, then the king gets another event with 2 basic options and 2 personality-driven options. The first option is humiliation, which just takes prestige away from the vassal, further deteriorating relations. The second one is imprisonment, which causes some tyranny depending on how big the gift was. If the gift was big and the king elects to be unhappy and imprison the vassal anyway, they take on a lot of tyranny. The last 2 vary heavily depending on personality. King Charles can use honest to simply ask for a larger gift, which if given would smooth things over at a relationship cost, and if not granted would make a rivalry. Charles could use just to demand an increased tax obligations from the vassal. These are just examples, of course, and could be different in the real thing, but the point is that personality plays a huge role in how these things turn out now. So that might have seemed complicated, really complicated. I can understand that, but remember that writing this out in words makes it look like a lot more than what it is. In reality, this would simply be a 2 to 3 event chain for the king, first reacting to how the vassal presents himself, second reacting to the gift, and then maybe third for doling out punishment. It would be a 2 to 3 event chain for the vassal who first chooses their gift, second their presentation, and potentially a third event as a reaction to a punishment if one comes. At the end of the event chain for both characters would be a flavor event outlining how the meeting went, and summarizing the changes to relations, reputation, and punishments given or received. Suddenly, paying homage could be a pretty huge event with a year-long period as a new king, where vassals are presenting themselves and the realm is abuzz with activity, eventually settling down. This would create the sense of transition that comes when a new king arrives in a way that isn't just a civil war. But right now, when a king dies, the player essentially expects civil wars and that's it. But we all know that this game could do so much more than just that. It would certainly be a lot of work to create all the reactions between personalities, but I believe that work would be worth it. There are 35 personality traits in the game, and assuming that every single trait had some kind of unique reaction to every other trait, that would be a whole hell of a lot of reactions. But I don't think traits like honest need a reaction to temperate or fickle. I'll leave it to the devs to decide which traits need reactions to each other. Even then, would it be so bad to create, let's say, 100 possibilities for this kind of event chain when this is so central to the game? Am I asking for too much when I say that the homage event, which is so central to the medieval time period and to Crusader Kings' world, be expanded on heavily? Even a small number, like 25 possible outcomes for an homage event chain, would be fine, right? The only problem I can see is that if you're an empire with 70 direct vassals, this could make for a whole lot of homage payment events that could get old really fast. My solution to that is simple. Only powerful vassals get the event chain. Other vassals just get the current pay homage event where it's a quick click and then it's over. For the king, they get a pop-up in the bottom right that just says the count of whatever land left 15 gold in gifts, or whatever their homage gift is. This way, each new monarch should only get 5 big event chains where a powerful vassal comes to pay homage, maybe 6 or 7 if powerful vassals shift around in that 1-year period, but that should be fine. That's not too many that it gets old, I believe. I believe that the system would make the actual personality disputes between vassal and liege matter, rather than being a meaningless change in opinion. It would also make the player more aware of what their vassals are like, and create some memories between them over how the homage went. I would also like it if the AI was heavily weighted to choose personality-driven options in the homage event chain. I want to see a tyrannical young king, with wrathful and arrogant really shoving his authority down my throat, and I want to see a craven and shy king that I can walk all over, and so on. This would make the idea of claimant wars a lot more meaningful too. Often when a claimant takes the throne, nothing really changes. But let's say some really awful king imprisons a couple powerful vassals who pay homage. I might band together with the other powerful vassals and overthrow this awful king to replace him with his much better brother who treats us justly. If the AI acted more according to its personality, we'd see claimants actually mattering. With this system, we'd also see more dynamic realms, with a truly awful king potentially losing vassals to independence factions when there's no viable claimant. I'd like to imagine that if a truly terrible king were to rule France, then the Duchy of Brittany might break free, swearing allegiance to another monarch for protection. Imagine the Duke of Brittany breaking free from France and then swearing fealty to England as a way to escape French tyranny. This could create a rivalry between England's king and France's king, as well as creating a sort of tenuous relationship between England and Brittany. It may be that the current King of England and the current Duke of Brittany get along, but if either of them dies, then suddenly we could see Brittany leaving England to go back to France, and so on. The point is that we get to see a much more personal and politically dynamic situation if the consequences for vassal-liege relations are harsher. At the end of the day, CK3 is a game about relationships, and that should be leveraged to create a game that actually does revolve around relationships between those vassals. I've gotten pretty specific in this section here, and that's because I believe that by being specific you can best understand what it would actually look like in the game. With a system like this, a succession becomes an extremely eventful moment in gameplay, which could be argued to be too chaotic or overwhelming, but to my estimation, an initial 1-year period of eventfulness would not detract from the game in any meaningful way. Because those homages only happen for a 1-year period and they only apply to powerful vassals, this wouldn't bog the game down in my opinion, avoiding the ever-present concern over bloat. Alright, so that was literally 5 pages about just one mechanic. Yeah, this is going to be one of those videos, isn't it? So that's mechanic 1 for vassals and lieges. Make paying homage matter. How about another mechanic for vassal and liege interactions? Similar to how culture works, a kingdom has certain unique traits about it. Everyone has heard of the old Frankish kingdom's Salian law and how it led to the 100 Years' War. This is one thing that made England different from France, not just culturally, but legally. France has never had a queen regnant, unlike England. A realm's laws ought to give it some kind of identity based on the whims of the kings and vassals who have ruled in it. The crown authority gradient should stay mostly as is, with levels 1 to 4, and the minimum feudal obligations as normal, but there should be a new addition to crown authority: the severity of laws in the realm and how strongly they're enforced. All realms ought to have a set of laws which could be created in a similar vein to cultural traditions, a massive pool of them, and then the choice to pick 4 to 8 or something of them. So let's talk about what laws I'd like to see implemented in CK3, then let's talk about how crown authority would affect them. The purpose of laws would be to create trade-offs between certain mechanics, like exchanging taxes for levies or taxes for development growth and stuff like that, along with some more creative options that I'll outline some examples of soon. This system is of course open to have a ton of different options, but I'll put down what I believe are some good candidates. The realm laws would be similar to cultural traditions in interface, where it's essentially a big list of options that are easier or harder to implement based on the realm's circumstances. These realm laws would be available for duchies, kingdoms, and empires, with the ability to implement 2 for a duchy, 4 for a kingdom, and 8 for an empire. All duchies, kingdoms, and empires, whether independent or not, may implement laws, with vassal realms getting half as many laws. That would mean an independent duchy gets 2 laws, but a vassal duchy only gets 1, and so on. Laws from a realm apply to their de jure territory. So if the laws of France are different than the laws of Aquitaine or Brittany, then the laws apply according to who each vassal has de jure allegiance to. Want to consolidate your realm laws? Destroy some kingdom titles, which will heavily damage vassal relations, but remove regionalism in the laws there. In the realm screen, add an additional tab for realm laws. This has a list of various laws and the ones the realm currently uses. This would be the hub for accessing the features of this mechanic. Every title would have some laws associated with it at game start, and any kingdom that is created after game start has the laws of the primary title of the person that created it. Let me provide you some examples of realm laws to get an idea of what they do. French language in all courts. The language of the court is propagated in the realm. Any vassal who does not speak French takes a prestige penalty, which scales with crown authority. Swap the word French with whatever the language of the royal court is. So in Castile, it would be Iberian Vulgar, in the Byzantine Empire, it would be Greek, and so on. Freedom of Religion Act. In this kingdom, all religions are welcome. This law would decrease the negative opinion for different faiths for lords and popular opinion, but create a negative opinion modifier with all theocratic vassals, scaling with crown authority. It would also heavily damage relations with the head of faith, depending on if the religion is pluralistic, righteous, or fundamentalist, and depending on the tier of title this law is being applied to, it would also disable the convert faith in county council action and the demand conversion action on characters or counties within the de jure land of the realm that this law applies to. Royal military service. The lords of this realm are required to serve in the military for a period of time, rather than to provide soldiers for their monarch. This law would make vassals give fewer levies to their monarch, but would force vassals to accept a call to arms from their monarch once every couple of years, with the number of years between calls and the reduction of levies being determined by crown authority. A vassal failing to participate in a war, similar to the current game's line system, is labeled a criminal and can be imprisoned and have titles revoked without tyranny. Enforced agnatic, cognatic, or equal inheritance. All vassals of this realm must obey a male-only or female-only or equal inheritance law depending on what law you pick. This law is a simpler one, with no tiers for crown authority or anything. It just forces inheritance laws on vassals. Right to privacy. People act how they will in this realm, knowing their private affairs are legally protected. This law makes it a crime to reveal someone's secret. It does not nullify the effects of revealing a secret, nor does it make the secret legal if it was illegal, but it makes the person who reveals the secret also a criminal. Crown authority changes what punishments can be done without tyranny to the secret revealer, with higher crown authority increasing the severity of legal punishment. Royal stewards. In this realm, vassals do not contribute taxes, but instead contribute magistrates to their monarch. The king gains domain limit and vassals lose domain limit in exchange for lower taxes on vassals, with the crown authority and title tier determining how much domain limit is gained or lost, and how much tax is removed. Council rights. The vassals of the realm with enough power are guaranteed a seat on the council in return for a promise of loyalty. Powerful vassals can never join factions if they are on the council, as well as having higher negative opinion modifiers not having a council seat as powerful vassals. Similar to the enforced inheritance laws, crown authority does not affect this law. Here's 7 laws as examples. Obviously more should be created, but these can be tweaked and we want to avoid blowing the game, so I only included a few. The AI, based on their personality, will seek to change these laws either through civil wars and factions, or by convincing the king to change laws. These laws can be changed through a petition, which is already in the Royal Court expansion of the game, through a hook, or by simply declaring a faction demand for it. There could also exist a way to vote on laws, similar to CK2's Conclave DLC, but the system in that game was pretty flawed and would need modification to work in CK3. As a king, changing laws would cost prestige, which scales with the learning stat. Given that this is already how changing crown authority is calculated, why not just use that directly? I think it makes sense, and would give an additional reason to have high learning besides going for those juicy lifestyle perks. A king could also skip the prestige costs and grab a huge tyranny penalty and force a law through, although this way of pushing a law would need a cooldown for game balance purposes most likely. I think changing laws via prestige and learning stats ought to have no cooldown, but cost more and more prestige based on how much time has passed between law changes. Crown Authority now acts as a weighting system for the laws of the realm, with higher Crown Authority making each law have more impact on the realm. This represents how effectively and harshly the law is enforced essentially. With this system, fighting a civil war to change laws would feel much more impactful, as the vassals might feel that the current laws favor the king too much, or trample on their ambitions within the realm. It would also make some vassals perhaps wish to leave the current realm and join a different one with laws they prefer. A good example I could see would be if the Umayyads had a Freedom of Religion Act taken away, and suddenly had to deal with their Mozarabic vassals wanting independence. Another example would be the Mongol Empire deciding to implement Mongolic language in all courts, and the vassals finding themselves losing prestige and wanting independence to avoid that, and so on. I want to make it clear that I do not want these particular 7 laws. What I want to see is a system like this, which is about creating and imposing laws onto the realm. This is more of a mechanical implementation. It doesn't really have much to do with roleplay in it. But even then, the AI monarchs might choose to implement laws based on their personality, or they could just focus on what benefits them. Either way, this system of complex royal law would be really useful for making each kingdom feel a bit unique from others. If a kingdom or empire is dissolved in a dissolution war or destroyed by choice, then its laws are still stored in the memory of that kingdom, and if any character creates title again, it will have all the laws it had when it was dissolved. I believe as well that this system would be easy to implement because the framework for it already exists through the culture system. There needs to be a little interface tab added to make it accessible, and then some sort of art to make pictures for the various laws. I believe this system would create a sense of internal politics that currently is missing from CK3. Every kingdom feels the same in CK3 at this sort of level. A unique set of realm laws which changes according to the whims of the monarchs and vassals. An extremely powerful king might implement an immense legal reform which is highly unpopular amongst vassals, which stays in place until he dies. The heir then bears responsibility of all those unpopular laws, and suddenly the realm either sees itself massively reforming or breaking down to civil war. This once again makes succession fun and interesting, as well as a genuine challenge. This would also give the player things to do during long periods of peace. If the laws are not where the player wants them, they can work towards gaining enough prestige through hunts and feasts to be able to change laws, and swaying vassals so they don't make a problem over the new laws. As the realm expands or shrinks, seeing its laws change would be interesting for the player and for AIs as a more flexible system to culture. For now, culture changes very slowly over time, but realm changes can be really fast. If it takes 50 years to make a new hybrid culture, let it take like 5 to make a new law or something. I particularly like how this mechanic would create a great opportunity for regionalism in laws. If Charles the Bald chooses to conquer Brittany and create the kingdom there, the realm laws of Brittany might look very different from West Francia's laws. Those laws might make people of Brittany more loyal or less loyal, but either way would make the decision of whether to create many kingdom titles or not more interesting. The AI might choose to destroy a title in order to prevent a law that damages their power from having an effect. Maybe Charles the Bald would add in the Royal Military Service law to the Kingdom of Brittany, meaning those vassals don't give levies, but in case he ever needs it, he can call on his Breton vassals to help him in wars. There's so many possibilities I absolutely love. I can even see France conquering a Muslim-dominated Catalonia and then giving it religious freedom. Finally, you could have lots of fun with lunatic realm laws, or secret realm laws that can only be unlocked with strange combinations, like a cannibal religion having a realm law banning consumption of non-human meat or something. It's like a weird form of vegetarianism where only humans can be eaten. It's kind of fun, actually. These would be relatively banal mechanically, but great roleplay fun. This change has less of an impact for the personal relationships between lords, but does bring some dynamics to realms, and could introduce things to argue over between lords, as well as incentives to betray the realm and join a different one with preferable laws, or even to strike out on your own, free of your lord's tyranny. I believe this mechanic adds depth to the game at a gameplay and roleplay level without being overly bloated. Given that the current cultural mechanics of CK3 add nicely to the game, and so far I've not given it a bloated feeling, I believe this change would not cause a problem for the game's focus. This change does lean more into the grand strategy aspect of the game, but I do believe it pays enough homage to the roleplay features of the game that it will fit right in. So that's 2 very specific mechanics I would like added to the game. Turn paying homage into a very serious affair of first impressions, reputations, and expectations, and put the jure back into de jure for all de jure realms at both a micro level, with each duchy having laws, and at a macro level, with every empire having a complex series of laws. If I were to name this DLC, I'd call it the Wax Seal or something, since the image of a royal seal comes to mind when I think of these 2 mechanics. I genuinely believe a DLC that adds in these 2 mechanics, with maybe some new flavor events, a bit of new art, and a music track or 2, would be worth like 25 USD, maybe 30 USD. As well, adapting these mechanics to interweave with other DLCs would be pretty simple, since not everyone has Royal Court. The realm law mechanic doesn't even need any changes to fit with Royal Court, except certain laws that pertain to mechanics only found in Royal Court would be inaccessible. The paying homage mechanic could simply have certain interactions that are dependent on artifacts, court grandeur, or other Royal Court exclusive mechanics removed. This would mean that having only the Wax Seal DLC and not the Royal Court DLC would lessen the value of it intrinsically, but that's all Paradox DLC policy and I see no problem with it. Okay, so that's one DLC idea. I've got a few more up my sleeve, so let's take a look at another one. It follows logically that after discussing a DLC all about internal politics and laws, that now we discuss external and foreign politics. One thing about CK3 that often feels lacking is the interaction between foreign monarchs. There's not really much to do besides make marriages and declare wars. I'd like to see more interactions between realms and interactions between characters from foreign realms. There's some events in the game currently that do make interactions happen, like when a foreign ruler visits your court as part of the diplomacy event set, which can be interesting, as well as the event chain where you exchange letters with a foreign ruler. These are cool, and I want more stuff like this, which can be proactive as opposed to random. I would like to see kings come to agreements that can have ramifications for their realms, their families, and their vassals. I would like to see kings do things besides make nonsensical alliances and become friends when there's not really any meaning to it. In the current game, does the King of France being friends with the King of England have any impact on the actual game? I would argue no, or at the very least extremely minimally. I am aware that friends tend to not attack each other, and that being friends makes getting marriages easier, and so on, but there should be more to it than that. As of right now, being a king pretty much lets you marry anyone you want anyway. The only time being friends matters for marriage purposes is if you're a count or duke trying to marry into a king's family. I want to see kings come to bilateral treaties that affect things between their realms. These treaties are essentially the mechanic I have in mind and act as the specificity for the ideas I have. Let's talk about treaties. A treaty would be an agreement between two independent monarchs. They range in effects from non-aggression pacts to military alliances, or tribute and maybe even unification of realms. Treaties, even more so than realm laws from the Wax Seal DLC, should not be bloated. There should only be a few different treaty types and variations that we'll go into in more detail soon. Treaties are created by individual characters but have lasting ramifications for realms and houses beyond their lifetimes. Vassals have a say in treaties that concern the realm, while house and dynasty members have a say in treaties that concern houses and dynasties. The say that individual characters have in any given treaty is based on their rank, their status as either independent or a vassal, their fame, and their diplomacy score. Treaties should be relatively flexible and be modular. A treaty should have a customizable name for roleplay purposes, with randomly generated names for players that don't care, and the AI should be capable of proposing them to both the player and other AIs. There are two overarching types of treaties with many subtypes. There are treaties between realms, and treaties between houses. Realm treaties can only be negotiated between two independent realms or two realms that have the same liege. House treaties can be made between two landed characters that are house heads and can be made between houses of the same dynasty. When proposing treaties, the first decision is whether this is a treaty between realms or houses. From there, each treaty type has a weight towards one side or the other based on the terms of it. Proposing a treaty that's favorable to one side makes them more likely to accept it, but upsets the vassals or house members that see themselves as losing something for it. Ultimately, the monarch or house head that is negotiating has the final say, dealing with whatever consequences they bring onto themselves for their decision. The terms that treaties can have, as previously said, will be modular, and I'll propose several options for what I think would be good, but ultimately, like usual, it's the idea I'm advocating for, not necessarily the specific things here. Let's talk about those specifics now. Let's start with realm treaties. Let's say it's 1066, and William the Conqueror has just conquered England, vanquishing Harold and Harald from England. For the time being, his army is weak, and he's worried that his old liege, Philippe of France, will come after his de jure territory of Normandy and the counties in Anjou. William does not want war, for whatever reason. I know he's pretty warlike, but for the sake of the hypothetical, we'll say he wants peace, okay? So he writes a letter to Philippe asking to discuss making a treaty. At this point, Philippe could either say yes or no. If he says no, William can't ask for another treaty for 5 years, and things remain as is. If Philippe says yes, then they can't declare war on each other until negotiations finish and a new UI appears. While a character is making a treaty with another character, no other character can offer a treaty to them, nor can they offer a treaty to another character. So only one treaty can be made at a time per character. In the bottom right corner by the map, where normally the Crusade button would be, a little scroll with a bird appears on it. This is the treaty UI. If you click it, it opens up a UI similar to the feudal contract UI with all sorts of boxes to click. Since William is proposing the treaty, he gets to create the first offer. I'll get into what exactly should be in the list of options, but let's say they're organized into a couple different types. There are demands and concessions. A demand is something you're asking for, a concession is something you're offering. Simple enough, right? William demands that France recognize Normandy as de jure English territory. The box for that appears because the title Duchy of Normandy exists and is owned either by William himself or a vassal of William's realm. William offers the concessions of giving all territories in the Duchy of Anjou to France. William also offers 100 gold. The box for giving territories in the Duchy of Anjou exists because the Duchy of Anjou either is created and held by a vassal of France, or Philippe himself, or the title doesn't exist but is a de jure part of France which Philippe rules. Gold can always be offered or demanded in a treaty. William has checked 3 boxes, 1 in demands and 2 in concessions. Before sending the treaty over, he has 2 options. He can announce the treaty to his realm first so that any vassal who is involved in the treaty, in this case anyone with land in Anjou or Normandy, along with the powerful vassals of the realm, may provide their opinions on it. Or William can send the treaty secretly, which may have an immense negative effect on his vassals' opinions of him, depending on the treaty. In this case, a secret treaty would severely upset the vassals of Anjou and Normandy, who are directly involved in the issue, and offend the powerful vassals who feel it is their right to participate in realm matters. For the sake of the hypothetical, William announces this treaty to his realm, convening all lords in Normandy and Anjou and all his powerful vassals. These people are now considered involved in the treaty and also have the UI element in the bottom right of the screen appear where they can propose changes to the treaty. The game now unpauses and all involved parties have 30 days to submit their changes and requests to the treaty before it gets sent to Philippe. Let's say the Duke of Mercia, a powerful vassal in England, adds to the demands that Philippe renounces claims that anyone in his realm has to Mercia. Mercia says that it will not sign off on this treaty unless William adds that demand to the treaty. As well, the Count of Maine, Robert Curthose, who is also William's son by coincidence, adds to the treaty that Philippe grants title revocation protection to him when he is transferred to France. This option is available because Robert will become a French vassal under this treaty. Once the 30 days are up, no other vassal can contribute to the treaty for now, and William can decide to reject or accept each vassal's idea. Rejecting an idea costs opinion with the vassal that proposed it, and accepting an idea gives opinion. William decides to reject the Duke of Mercia's ask and accepts Robert Curthose's demand. The treaty now has 4 boxes checked, 2 in demands and 2 in concessions. The treaty asks that Normandy be de jure drifted into England instantly and that Robert Curthose be given title revocation protection under France, while it concedes all counties in Anjou to France and concedes 100 gold. William now sends the treaty to Philippe, who gets an event saying a treaty has arrived with some flavor text about the language is written in, the court language of the kingdom it came from, or the native language of the monarch that sent it if the monarch is less than the king. This is just flavor, and it only has one option that just says, let's have a read, or something. Now Philippe has the treaty UI element in the bottom right of his screen. He has 1 year to respond to the treaty before William considers the treaty to have been ignored, which would end the treaty negotiations and harm relations. When Philippe clicks the UI element in the bottom right, the same thing that William sent is what Philippe sees. A bunch of boxes with various demands and concessions clicked. Philippe now has a similar decision to William. He can show this to the realm or negotiate in secret with the same potential negatives for keeping it a secret as William. Philippe decides to show the treaty to his realm. Any character with land in Anjou or Normandy and the powerful vassals get 30 days to add in their demands. In this case, the Duke of Anjou wants Philippe to add that Robert Curthose pays high taxes as opposed to normal taxes when he gets transferred to him. No other vassal has any other opinions. 30 days pass and no vassals have anything to say, so Philippe can choose to reject or accept those demands. He accepts the Duke of Anjou's demand and adds to the treaty. He then sends it back to William, who receives the treaty again. This cycle repeats until either monarch sends the treaty back without any changes made. At any point, negotiations can break down if either 5 years pass with no agreement made, either monarch ignores a treaty offer for 1 year, or if either monarch dies during the negotiation period. William eventually sends the treaty back to Philippe with the following terms. Duchy of Normandy is de jure drifted into England. Count Robert Curthose becomes a vassal of the Duke of Anjou, who is a vassal of the Duke of France. Count Robert Curthose gets title revocation protection in his feudal contract. William pays 100 gold to Philippe. Robert Curthose pays high taxes as part of his feudal contract to the Duke of Anjou. Now the treaty is over, and all of its effects take place, with both monarchs gaining opinion with each other for a successful treaty, and a 10-year truce being put between the two. All negotiations create a 10-year truce and increase opinion. The Duke of Mercia loses some opinion of William because his ask was not put into the treaty. All de jure vassals of France lose opinion of Philippe from him shrinking France's de jure territory. As well, the success of this treaty gives 10% cultural acceptance between English and French culture. Okay. So that to me was a pretty comprehensive overview of treaties between realms. In this case, there are big ramifications with it, and I like it a lot. These treaties are to be taken seriously and have big effects on the two realms. They can create a sense of combativity between the two realms without actual war, instead of using diplomacy to get what both parties are comfortable with. The big question here is why not just go to war? The reason is that treaties can accomplish things that wars cannot. For example, the de jure drifting being instant is a great incentive to be diplomatic over warlike. As well, treaties can force marriages or gain money. Essentially, the incentive to use these treaties gameplay-wise is to obtain outcomes that war cannot obtain, and to keep cultural acceptance high. In terms of what actual things a treaty can do, I don't want it to be too bloated, but honestly, since it gets a whole new UI and everything, I can see there being quite the myriad of options. I like the idea of renouncing claims, de jure drifting land, transferring vassals, contracts, religious protections, cultural protections, and money, among other things, all of which will elicit certain reactions from the realm's vassals. For example, if England were to make a different treaty where they gave Normandy to France, but also make France unable to convert Norman culture for 100 years, then the English king could get a house modifier called Protector of the Normans for 100 years that gives them plus 10 opinion with all Normans or something like that. I very much like the idea of adding demands to a treaty in return for house modifiers like that. That way houses could obtain reputations and modifiers for their work, and the actions of your family can ripple throughout. These modifiers should be small, but exist nonetheless for roleplay purposes above all. The other end of treaties is house treaties, and these would be very similar except that instead of vassals having things to say, family members will. And instead of affecting the realm, they affect personal holdings and family relations. I don't want to drag this out too much, so I'm going to do a much faster explanation of the house treaties. Let's say House de Normandy wants to offer a treaty to House England. William de Normandy, the Conqueror, as house head, can offer a treaty to Harold England, since he too is house head. William proposes a treaty, and Harold accepts to discuss a treaty, so the UI appears, blah blah, you know how it goes. William sends a treaty with one demand. Harold and everyone in his house renounces any claims to the Kingdom of England. He also adds in one concession. House de Normandy will lease all cities in their domain to House England's house head for 5 years. Leasing cities refers to giving all their income and levies to Harold, similar to when a holy order leases land from someone. The mayors of those cities stay in control, but instead of paying their taxes and levies to the ruler of those counties, they pay them to the leasee. Notice that this treaty is between the houses, meaning that if either one dies, the treaty goes on, since it is between houses, not characters. Also, this means that the entirety of House de Normandy is affected, since any member of the house will have their cities leased to the Inglings. William can now choose to present this treaty to his family first, then send it to Harold, or send it secretly. In this case, William's family is basically all unlanded, so he doesn't care to confer with his family and just sends his treaty. Harold does show the treaty to his family since he has many landed family members whose opinions matter to him. One of Harold's family members, who rules part of Norway, wants Harold to add that William's firstborn daughter be betrothed to a male in House England. Harold accepts adding that demand and sends it back to William with that additional demand. Now the treaty says that Harold's house renounces claims to the Kingdom of England, and in return House Normandy leases the cities to House England, and William's daughter get married to one of House England's men. William agrees and sends the treaty back, without his family's consent. He's deeply obsessed with his firstborn daughter, who suddenly is in a marriage. William doesn't really care because she's unlanded and a woman. Robert Curthouse, who does have land, is a bit upset over having his cities leased, and so takes a negative opinion modifier with William as well. Everyone else in House Normandy takes a small opinion penalty for not being involved in the treaty, but they're too irrelevant to matter. In the case of house treaties, only landed house members or close house members like children, siblings, and parents get a say. When the treaty is signed, the claimants from House England give up their claims, the cities are leased, and the betrothal between the families happens. As well, Norwegian and English culture gain 5% acceptance with each other. Either way, that's a house treaty. They affect the personal holdings of the house members and the family members of the house, as opposed to the realm. These house treaties also take up the treaty slot that realm treaties take up, so only one can be worked on at a time, and they have the same time limits as realm treaties. Much like realm treaties, house treaties can be a great way to obtain things that normally are not possible to obtain through war, while also fostering good relations between cultures and houses. I intend for treaties to be mutual agreement, as opposed to be threatening, but they could be used to enforce effective tributary states too in a way. France could, for example, charge the Kingdom of Brittany a tribute in return for a permanent truce or something, but I feel that making tributary should be its own mechanic, while treaties should be what they currently are according to what I proposed. Another idea I'm playing around with in my mind, although I am uncertain of actually implementing it, is the ability to create a treaty, and if it is rejected, the ability to force it onto the enemy through war. The main problem is that I don't want the game falling back onto war. I want treaties to be a genuine form of diplomacy. That being said, I think using a hook to force one box to get checked, maybe force 2 boxes with a strong hook, that could be good, but that's about all I'm willing to add in for hostile negotiations, you could call it. So those are treaties. I think they would be a great way to make fostering friendly relationships with foreign monarchs more meaningful, and the ability to create meaningful treaties with other monarchs means choosing the diplomatic route may actually have some value. That being said, the ability to get monarchs to like you might have to be rebalanced, since right now it's very easy to get 100 opinion with characters and relatively quickly by just having high court grandeur and high fame. Then again, maybe having high fame characters be well loved makes sense for treaty making. The actual balance is something to be considered, but in concept, I love the treaty system. So there's treaties, which are meant to be mutually beneficial, but let's take a look at not so mutual agreements as another interaction between realms. Tribute demands ought to be based on the culture of the monarch demanding the tribute, I believe, along with some basic tribute options that anyone can ask for. I have a couple specific examples to go over, as usual, along with some more ideas about the intention and design of tributaries. To me, a tributary ought to be a relationship between 2 characters as opposed to realms. Tribute paid from one monarch to another directly benefits that monarch who receives a tribute. Tribute should take the most basic form of cash, but unique tribute forms based on culture should also be available. The system would directly tie into the cultural tradition system of the game, where the culture of the target realm's ruler determines the unique tribute offering. I'll present some ideas for unique offerings along with some situations where tributary states make the most sense. First off, there should be hard limits on what realm can or can't be a tributary state. First of all, an empire can never be a tributary state. That's just for balancing's sake, and because it would just be kind of weird. Secondly, no realm can make a realm which is more than half of its size become a tributary. These restrictions might seem rather arbitrary, but the truth is, it is. This is purely because I do not want the game to devolve into a realm simply making a tributary of everything around it, like in CK2. The final restriction is that no realm can make a tributary of any realm which is part of its de jure title. Just so we don't do something cursed, like West Francia making a tributary of the Duchy of Valois, a realm ought to seek to directly control its de jure territory. This one is arguable though, and I'm willing to let that third exception slide. The other two I'm quite firm on though. So let's talk about how establishing tribute goes. While friendly relations make tribute more possible, the way tributary states are established is based on only three things: dread, army size, and personality. An ambitious, stubborn, arrogant character will basically never become a tributary, period. Meanwhile, a craven character might submit to give tribute even if they're stronger than their opponent. The time when a tributary state is more beneficial than direct conquest is when the benefits of the tribute outweigh the benefits of owning that land, which can sometimes be the case. I'm going to use the example of Anglo-Saxon England and Wales. Let's say England makes Wales a tributary. Wales has the longbow competitions as a cultural tradition. This means England can ask to exploit that cultural tradition and get a modifier like longbow training, which gives archers 15% damage and toughness. They can also just ask for money. All realms can provide money. Instead of wanting extra archer stats, maybe England wants something else. They could use Welsh's refined poetry to get themselves access to Welsh poetry, giving the king +1 prestige per month. The tradition they choose to exploit can be changed only once every 5 years to prevent spamming out random changes. The modifiers from these unique tributes are scaled based on the tier of realm providing the tribute. Counts give 0.1 prestige, dukes give half a prestige, and kings give 1 prestige in the case of refined poetry. Also, a unique tribute can only be demanded from a culture once. For example, if you have 2 Welsh tributaries, you can't use one to get the poetry bonus and the other to get the archery bonus. The other Welsh tributary would give money by default. Another example of unique tribute would be to use the Breton Swords for Hire tradition to get cheaper mercenaries. You can create all kinds of modifiers for each cultural tradition. Having multiple cultures with the same cultural tradition does not allow stacking. For example, if France were to make a tributary state of English England and Wales, it can't ask to exploit longbow competitions twice. If Wales provides the archer bonus, England must provide something else. The UI for asking for tribute would be a diplomacy action where the player selects a demand tributary status and then gets a UI similar to the declare war UI, but the culture traditions available to exploit in the list instead of casus belli, and then a default option for just money at the top. A tributary state is effectively allied to the tribute taker, except it's one way. Any defensive war against the tributary state drags in the tribute taker, but the tributary state cannot call in their tribute taker. The tribute taker also cannot call in the tributary state to any of its wars. Tributary status between states ends either when the tributary state's ruler dies, or if they declare war on their overlord. As well, tribute ends if the tributary state grows to be more than half the size of its overlord, or if they ever obtain an empire tier title. I think tributary status based on culture like this would be a good way to incentivize creating tributary states rather than just blobbing. Obviously not every ruler will want to make tributaries though. This is where personality comes in. If the king of France is ambitious, he probably won't care to make tributaries. He'd rather obtain new territory. If the ruler of France is lazy though, he might choose to make tributary states. I'm not sure exactly how traits ought to determine tributary state desirability, but generally speaking, I'd like for the AI to favor making tributaries if it would rather not go to war. Perhaps it would mostly be determined by military and economic factors rather than personality. The downside to being a tributary is that the ruler and their entire realm does not get the benefit of their exploited cultural tradition while being a tributary. If they're giving money, then they simply lose some income. In this sense, being a tributary can really suck, and it will also make the vassals dislike you, since you're also robbing them of the benefit of the cultural tradition. Being a tributary also degrades cultural acceptance between the states, giving and receiving tribute, meaning demanding tribute from a realm which has culture that your own vassals have may be a bad idea. I think that particular balance would be something to be tested and chosen based on a few AI games, which is outside of what I can do in this video, of course. I do hold that tribute being unique to the tributary culture makes a lot of sense and gives a lot of interest to making them, unlike CK2 where they were pretty much pointless. Finally, I think a realm should be able to offer to become a tributary if it pleases, as a way to keep itself safe. If threatened by a foreign power, or if simply looking to not get conquered, choosing to give tribute may be best. With that all said, tributes in CK3 would be pretty simple: extra money or a new modifier. These agreements are between characters and last in the short term. Tributary states give one more way to interact with foreign realms of unequal power, while treaties work for realms of relatively equal power. I think tributaries play nicely to pre-existing mechanics well, and play a good role in making unique interactions between realms and cultures without bloating the game. Again, I emphasize heavily the fact that I desperately wish to avoid bloating the game. I'd like to dub this DLC Dotted Line, since it's about agreements and signatures and stuff. I think having this be separate from the wax seal is kind of iffy. In a way, the two DLC sets are similar, but I think what divides them from each other is how they focus on the internal and the external respectively. That line merits their existence as separate DLCs in my mind. If I were to combine these DLCs into one, I'd call it Deal or No Deal. Look, I'm no good at naming this stuff, okay? Give me a break. You think naming things is easy? Why do you think most people are named Michael? Sometimes you just gotta go with what you know. It's unreasonable to expect everyone to be able to come up with good names, and I'm sick of the expectations being... So yeah, Deal or No Deal would be a pretty big DLC with lots to add for diplomacy options internally and externally. I'd definitely be happy to buy something with mechanics that's interesting and complex, especially if it comes with some interesting achievements and a couple unique decisions to form some cool empires or to get some cool modifiers. What I like about both these DLC sets is that they focus on a small set of well thought out mechanics. Quality over quantity. As well, they focus in on the identity of Crusader Kings as something of a social drama RPG without entirely ignoring the fact that it still remains a grand strategy game. It's often too easy to neglect the dualistic nature of CK3. It's not just a grand strategy game, nor is it just an RPG. It genuinely is both, and needs to be treated as such. With the lack of interesting Liege-Vassal relations, CK3 has been feeling lacking as an RPG, and with lack of strategic challenge, the game has been feeling lacking as a grand strategy. These DLCs amend both issues, at least a little bit. Besides that though, there's more to think about in CK3, so let's step away from diplomacy and vassal interactions to look at something else entirely. Societies and peacetime interactions. Obviously, being a monarch is kind of a full-time job, so there's rarely any kind of free time for them to do what they want to do. But at the same time, this is a video game, so for the purpose of fun and entertainment, we'll grant that monarchs have a little more extra time than their real-life counterparts. I'd like to take the society system from CK2 and essentially revamp it to better suit CK3 while taking it in a more dynamic and relationship-oriented direction. Societies as they were in CK2 were simple and well done, but at times flat and too simple. Most of the societies are relatively passive, with the various warrior lodges being a little more proactive and the devil cult being the most proactive. I think there's a place for both to exist in the game, and therefore we'll seek to preserve that. Not every mechanic has to get the player deeply involved, so a couple societies that don't really ask much of the player are fine. That's the intention for how they'll feel, but how about the way they contribute to the game? A society ought to be a place for creating productive friendships and competitive rivalries. Consider that a society is sort of like a pyramid. There are only a limited number of spots at the top, and reaching the top should only be available for the most dedicated of that society. That being said, it should not be the case that only the top position is worth holding. That should outline the idea that membership in a society is like give and take. If you give more time and effort to the society, you'll gain more from it. When I say effort, I want to avoid societies being another court amenity style slider. I do not want X gold for X reward, plus a minimum investment to avoid penalties. That is uninteresting and boring, but most of all, annoying. I can handle one money slider like court amenities. There's a place for some simple mechanics, but multiple of them is no good at all. Effort in this case will refer to time invested via schemes. I like this way of doing it because losing access to schemes in order to accomplish progress in the society would be a more creative and tangible loss than just money. These schemes would use different stats and relationships to influence how well the scheme goes. Rather than secrecy as a stat, these schemes would have success chance as normal and great success chance or critical success chance. Basically, a second number that's similar to secrecy, but it's a little different. As well, these schemes should not be meaningless in terms of how they affect the world. The machinations of societies, secret or otherwise, ought to be felt by non-society members. These effects may be positive or negative, and non-society members may wish to intervene to either promote or prevent the activities of some societies. I believe that societies should not be these strange worldwide organizations where characters from across entirely different realms meet to do things. I believe societies should be a realm-wide issue that only occasionally interact across realms. For example, there might be a Craftsman's Guild of France and a Craftsman's Guild of England. They will rarely interact, but here and there at a special event, they may. I also believe that societies should not be omnipresent and always existing. A society should be able to get completely wiped off the face of the planet. A society should be founded by a patron who funds the initial opening costs. This would be a large amount of gold, but a flat amount that doesn't scale with income. The founder can choose from one of many society types, and once founded, becomes the leader and sole member. From there, the society grows based on whether people join it or not, and how well they perform in their tasks. Membership in societies will function as part of the secret system. If a society is tolerated, it will not be secret. If it's shunned, it's worth a weak hook in blackmail, and if they're a criminal society, they'll be worth a strong hook. Criminality of a society is based on a religion of the people looking at the society and what the society does. For example, a cannibal society would not be considered criminal to a ritual cannibal religion, but all other religions would consider it criminal. A bachelor society would consider it shunned or criminal based on the fornicating laws if the person in the society is single, or would consider it shunned or criminal based on the adultery laws if the person is married. So that sort of naturally leads me to talking about different types of societies I envision. This is where the sky is the limit, but for the purpose of specificity and avoiding bloat, I'm going to explain 3 basic society types, each of which will have a different way to join. The first type are public societies, which can be joined at will, similar to the monastic orders in CK2. These societies are the most above board of any society and are well accepted in the realm. The tasks that these societies ask of their members are generally beneficial for at least part of the realm, and rarely, if ever, cause problems. The second type are exclusive societies, which can only be joined by invite. These are public and tolerated societies like public societies, but they cannot be joined without an invite from a member. These societies are a mixed bag. Certain individuals will benefit and others will lose based on the tasks done by this type of society. The third type are secret societies, which can only be joined via invite as well. These are the juicy drama societies that, if you're a member of, might get you in trouble. Inviting for these types of societies is riskier, since by sending an invite, you also inform the invitee of your membership in that society. It's a risk to send invites willy-nilly, so it's harder to get one. What these societies do is almost always detrimental to the realm, and non-members of it will want these sorts of societies eradicated in most scenarios. A realm must be at least a kingdom to have societies, and a kingdom can only have a maximum of 3 societies, while an empire can have 5. Only independent realms can have societies, so a vassal kingdom gets 0 societies, and instead participates in their empire's 5 societies. Let's talk about the first group. I'm going to give out some examples of groups that would fall into this category, and a couple tasks for each of those societies, along with the effects they might have. First up, public societies. The Historian Society. Historians are archaeologists and writers that seek to most accurately create books and scrolls that document historical events, as well as recovering artifacts that contribute physical evidence to prove the claims of those books and scrolls. Historians often visit sites of important events or conduct interviews of lords to get down to the truth. There are 2 main tasks for historians: visiting important places and taking notes, or conducting interviews of lords. Taking notes uses learning, while conducting interviews uses diplomacy. All schemes are done as regular schemes in the game, where there's a schemer and a target. A fellow member of the society may send an offer to another member to take notes together, and any member can offer to interview any lord in the realm that the society operates in. The ability for that lord's interview to be useful to the book depends on their memories. During these schemes, various pulse events pop up, just like other schemes, that can influence the outcome of those schemes. The leader of the Historians Guild decides the book topic, and then members contribute to the book by doing either an interview lord scheme, or doing a investigate relevant region scheme. The leader of the guild gets the actual book artifact, while the historians in the guild get prestige based on how much they contributed to making the book. Keep in mind that these historians, while performing their tasks, will be presented with pulse events where they might see a fellow historian working on some notes. If you don't want the person's contribution to overtake yours, maybe you sabotage their notes. If you want that person to like you, maybe you help them write. Otherwise, you might just focus on your own work and increase its quality. This is how the drama comes in, and it could create great friendships or awful rivalries, depending on the choices of the society members. Too much bickering and the book might suck, meaning everyone loses, but help your fellow historians too much and you might not get the recognition that you deserve. Leadership in the Historians Guild is based on who contributed the most to the most recent book project. Essentially, the founder is the first leader of the society, they choose the book topic. Once the book is complete, the leader keeps the book and steps down, then whoever had the highest contribution becomes the new leader, and that cycle repeats. The benefits of a Historians Guild for the guild members is the creation of unique book and scroll artifacts that provide modifiers based on how well the Historians Guild writers wrote the book, and how much evidence they could find to support their writing, whether that be in the form of stuff they found in the places, or testimony from interviewees. Writing books also gives huge prestige to writers, especially if those books spread around, as well as access to the book artifacts themselves. The realm benefits from the Historians Guild by getting to be patrons of projects the historians present. Being a patron for a book or study gets you huge prestige based on how well the book performs. Think of it like funding an inspiration, but instead of getting the artifact, you get prestige. If the book does really well, you could get a lot of prestige. If the book is terrible, you might even lose prestige. It's a bit of a gamble based on how much you trust the writers. You can also be interviewed by historians or offer artifacts to help create books instead of providing funding, which may also gain or lose you prestige. That's the Historian Society. It might seem a little complex, but I think it would be simpler than it sounds to make work. The next public society I'll display is the Athletic Club, which is quite self-explanatory. I like this one a lot because the purpose of it is twofold: to gain prestige, but also to gain health traits, prowess, win cash, and get new knights that respect your physical abilities. Athletes train for competitions that happen every 5 years, where they show off their physical abilities in entertaining shows for the realm. The cooldown between competitions could of course be modified based on game balance, but I think 5 years would be acceptable. Athletes risk injuring themselves during training and competitions, especially if their rivals see opportunities, but fame, wealth, and glory await truly exemplary athletes. Anyone can join the athletic club, but older characters tend to have lower prowess than younger ones, and all events related to injuries during training or competitions have higher odds to happen the older the character is. As well, those injuries are more impactful at older ages. There's only one task for athletes to do: train. When a competition is announced, athletes can use their prowess score to start doing training schemes that give them an increased training score. Think of training score like a temporary prowess score that only applies to the athletics competition. You cannot use athletics training to increase your prowess for purposes outside of training, except for the side effects that training can give. So for example, if you become strong because you've been training, that prowess stays forever, but the training score from that scheme does not stay forever. Much like the Historians Guild, training is a paired situation. The schemer and their target both train each other and equally benefit from the scheme when it is active. Okay, so that's how training works. How about competitions? The competition is essentially an event chain that piggybacks on the dueling system, where instead of using weapons to fight, the participants use different techniques in competitions against other athletes to win events. For example, let's say there's a javelin throwing competition. You may be presented with different options that have higher injury chances but more success chance against the opponent, and vice versa. You might be able to taunt your opponent and throw them off their game, or talk to the crowd to gain prestige, but basically just copy and paste the current dueling system into this system, but replace the flavor text with Olympic-style competition stuff. To me, doing this is clean, simple, and fun, since the dueling system is genuinely pretty cool. I'd be entirely fine recycling the system here in the Athletic Guild. The competition goes on as an elimination system, where if you lose, you're out, and the winner of the competition is the person that hasn't lost a single competition while there are no more participants. Obviously, that could be reworked to make an actual system that fits sports better. I honestly don't know a lot about how tournaments work, except for Blood Bowl, so rip on that part. Participants gain prestige based on their rank in the competition. A competition is held once every 5 years, and the leader of the society hosts the event in their capital. This is a benefit to them because the influx of commoners and lords to the county increases development, taxes, and popular opinion. Just like with historical societies, the winner of the competition becomes the new leader afterwards. If the current leader is also the winner of the competition, they will step down, and the second place contestant becomes leader for the next cycle competition. This way we keep rotating who's leading. The rewards for athletes in this society are obvious: gaining health traits along with competition winnings. The big draw will be gaining and reinforcing those genetic traits like Hail, and getting tough to gain traits like Strong. I'm still questioning if I want to add in things like Hail or Herculean, because those are genetic, not really gainable normally otherwise, but again, that's a detail that can be ironed out in balancing. The rewards for the realm that the society presents are stress relief and popular opinion gain across the realm. Successful competitions are entertaining ones, and if people are entertained, they won't revolt as much. As well, lords in attendance at the competitions can get a much needed break from their duties as monarchs. So as to not drag this section out too much, I'll list a couple other public societies, but not go into detail. I like the idea of the following: maybe a gardener's society, or a pet owner's society, stuff like this. Most of these societies will function in relatively similar ways, with only the advantageous skills, the rewards, and the realm benefits being different for each one. Keep in mind that public societies will tend to be pretty much universally positive, at the cost of those benefits not being as interesting or useful for their members. Essentially, a public society is the safest of any option for a society, and its members need not fear any persecution. Most public societies are either entirely cooperative, like the Historians Guild, or they are forms of friendly competition, like the Athletic Club. Not all societies are so friendly and positive, though. Let's have a look at some exclusive societies, which are something of a middle ground between the more nefarious secret societies and the cute little public societies. Exclusive societies are not necessarily bad for the realm, but can have negative impacts at times on individuals or sections of the realm. To join these societies, a member must invite you, and membership is publicly known. This means if you want to join, check the list of members and try making friends with one of them. They might just invite you in. So, to get into some more specifics, let's go into detail on one or two of these exclusive societies to help understand them. Then I'll put a list of a few without details for brevity's sake. First off, we've got the Scientific Society. This society is dedicated to the advancement of knowledge and understanding in the world, and it often comes under fire from the church for their focus on knowledge over God. Most scientific society members are cynical, and zealous characters are barred entry to the society. You could change your mind about that, but I think it'd be good to get rid of zealous people from it. Science is often a dangerous practice, especially at the upper echelons. Sometimes experiments for research purposes demand human subjects, or the construction of bizarre contraptions that might wreak havoc on the environment around them. To these dedicated scientists, though, those things are meaningless in the face of greater truth. Scientists operate in many fields, ranging from alchemy and physics to engineering, with the goal of creating useful things out of the research they do. For example, an engineering project might create an aqueduct, which increases development and popular opinion in the county it's built in. An alchemy project might one day turn lead to gold, or simply make a baking soda volcano. Who knows? The projects available for a scientific society leader to choose would be chosen in an event chain. First, they pick the field of research. It could be alchemy, physics, engineering, or anatomy, or something. That sort of thing that could be figured out later. but for now there are 4 options that come to my head. Then, once having chosen the field, there are 4 tiers of difficulty for research. If Liege chooses alchemy, the lowest tier would be simple things like derusting weapons with a chemical compound or making flares with magnesium. The hardest tier would be the legendary Philosopher's Stone, which would be an artifact of immense value and power. Again, these are just my ideas, and the actual specifics of each task could be entirely different, as well as what fields are present. Something like the Philosopher's Stone might be hard to get away with because it's kind of a bit mystical and magical, so if you want to keep it grounded in reality, make it something else. The benefits and potential destruction these research projects can cause is based on their difficulty. When choosing a difficulty level for a field, there would be many goals for easy ones and a few specific goals for harder ones. The goals are randomly chosen when the difficulty is chosen. Easier experiments have little risk, while harder ones can have long-running impacts on the scientific society's members and the realm they operate in. Members contribute to the necessary research for their society by exploiting their domain, courtiers, and themselves at times to add research points to the society. Either way, the positives and negatives of these projects take form mostly as temporary character and county modifiers, as well as the occasional artifact along with a healthy bit of strained relations with the religious authorities. Another exclusive society that I have in mind would be something like the Fashionista Society. This group of lords is all about aesthetics and beauty of all things personal grooming and clothing. Fashionistas hold beauty pageants to prove their superiority, and their competitions are often ripe with drama and competition. Fashionistas compete to be the most attractive lords and ladies of the realm, earning themselves respect and potentially suitors, as well as simply looking really damn good. A lord might wish to be a fashionista for any of 3 reasons: to benefit their domestic standing amongst vassals, to appear better for foreign monarchs, and of course, to satisfy their immense ego. A person can join the Fashionistas if a member invites them, but inviting willy-nilly is a bad idea for members, as inviting any character who isn't at least a little attractive would reflect badly on their judgment of aesthetics. After all, no one wants to waste time at a fashion competition looking at obvious losers. It's gotta be competitive. Fashion competitions are held every couple years, with participants spending lavish amounts of wealth to buy the raw materials necessary for sewing the most beautiful clothes, and to hire the greatest makeup artists and tailors of all. Essentially, the Fashionista Society is a way to invest absolutely insane amounts of gold into gaining prestige, attraction, opinion, and fame, dependent on the court grandeur of the realm the society is part of. If the Fashionista Society of a realm has only level 1 court grandeur, they won't really care in the wider world what they do. But if their court grandeur is level 10, their decisions about fashion may influence the wider culture and religious spheres. In this way, Fashionista societies help increase realm grandeur at the cost of immense amounts of wealth and talent being concentrated into what is ultimately vanity. As well, lords and ladies who are fashionistas will lose immense opinion of lords that don't keep up their court grandeur, forcing the monarch to spend more money on the court, lest they face the wrath of their upset fashionista lords. Competitions are interesting in that it's not just about how much money is invested, but also choices that each member makes about the style they're going for. The leader of the society gets to decide the judges of the competition, and the judges are deeply important because their personality and interests will determine how they decide who wins. Investing money into the best possible talent and resources is important, but at the same time, choosing outfits and looks that match the tastes of the judges can matter even more. Similar to an elective succession for a title, the judges act as electors, and they elect for the title of Most Fashionable. Their votes are public, and the player can see why they favor one person's costume over the others. It might be because the muted colors appeal to their humble nature, or it might be because they like that person more, or it could be because there's blackmail behind the scenes. Who knows? That's the drama. Regardless, the winner of a fashion contest, whether deserving or not, gets to pick the judges for the next competitions and gains a ton of fame, marriage proposal acceptance, and attraction opinion. If the court grandeur of the court is high, they get stronger modifiers, and if it's lower, the modifiers are weaker. This society is intertwined with court grandeur as a mechanic. That would also mean that you'd have to have royal court for this society to work, but there'd be probably some way to make it work in a non-royal court way. I just like the idea of being tied to grandeur personally. Fashionistas are luckily pretty simple as a society, so don't have to spend as much time on them, meaning we can move on to diabolical secret societies. Remember that secret societies are not always going to be evil devil worshippers, but instead are just groups which having membership in may not be something you'd want public. For example, being a public member of a society based around pulling pranks on other lords would be problematic, although not entirely condemnable. Secret societies are the ones whose tasks are clandestine in any way. Let's go over a couple secret societies and their purposes and rewards while trying to present a wide array of them ranging from relatively harmless to disastrously consequential. First off, let's talk about that prankster society mentioned earlier. These guys just love putting lords and ladies into embarrassing situations, which depending on the prank could be taken in lighthearted jest or might just throw the realm into a dramatic scandal. Pranksters are pretty disorganized and have no formal leadership, unlike most societies. Instead, pranksters spend their time finding agents to help them in their prank schemes against lords they mutually want to prank. Think of it as a networking group, where it's not about becoming leader and reaping benefits, but instead about finding like-minded individuals who help you pull off your prank while keeping things under wraps. Joining the Prankster Society is also an invite-only basis, but it can be expedited by finding out that someone is a member of the society, and then blackmailing them to let you in. This is how joining all secret societies works, and in most cases is a more difficult task than joining other societies. A prankster can choose to scheme against their prank target using either a benign prank, an embarrassing prank, or a scandalous prank. They're listed in order of difficulty to pull off, and adverse effects on the target, as well as consequences for getting caught. The characters only choose the level of prank, but the actual prank itself is randomized, for the sake of avoiding bloat. We don't want 20 possible schemes for all the different pranks a character can pull after all. Just 3 is fine. Benign pranks are relatively harmless towards a character, and are often non-public affairs. Things like swapping a lord's ale with urine, or drawing a mustache on their face while they sleep. It might cause some stress, but ultimately is easily fixed. Most lords will take some offense to these plots if the perpetrators are caught, but won't cause a big ruckus over it. Some might even enjoy it, depending on their personality. Embarrassing pranks are a little more serious, and can cost a target's prestige or piety. Most lords would consider these pranks too far, although some particularly easygoing lords may let them go. An example of an embarrassing prank would be putting some disgusting herbs in their food at a feast, having their pants fall down while they're giving a speech, or hiding an animal in their clothes, only for them to discover at an inopportune moment. These things are embarrassing for a lord or lady, and will certainly stress them out, as well as making the court laugh at them, but probably won't cause any real problems unless they happen constantly. Finally, a scandalous prank is one that could actually cause political upheaval or serious reputational damage to a character. These pranks can be taken as crimes, depending on how the monarch of the realm decides to judge things, if the pranksters are caught, of course. These sorts of pranks might involve hiring prostitutes to bother the lord while holding court.
Can I help you?
Howie, you know.
Or altering a speech written in a language the lord may not be so familiar with that says,
पिछले 32 साल से इन्होंने निरंतर इस कॉलेज में बलात्कार पे बलात्कार किया। इसका मतलब है चमत्कार पे चमत्कार।
They could also involve drugging them with the help of an herbalist, prankster, to make them do all sorts of wild things during courtly activities. These sorts of pranks can cause life-altering stress for some monarchs, alongside the harm to the reputation they can have. For this reason, most lords and ladies do not want prankster societies to exist in their realm, although of all the secret societies, this one is one of the less harmful ones. As a prankster, you can make great friendships and build trust with other members, which translates to things outside of the pranking world. A prankster buddy of yours probably won't try to harm you in other situations in the real political world because you get along so well as friends. Besides that, completing successful pranks helps keep stress down and health up, since laughter is, after all, the best medicine. Now let's talk about some more sinister secret societies though, since those are pretty juicy too. How about something spicy like the Assassin Society? This society is pretty obvious. Assassins kill people for money. Not really much more to it than that. This society has a more interesting way of interacting with the secret system. Essentially, any character who knows a character that is a member of the Assassin Society can ask that character to put in a contract for them, and contracts cost gold. When a contract is out, the Assassin Society do their best to kill the target, competing for who can kill the target first to get all contract money themselves, or working together to get the target, splitting it amongst themselves. Think of assassins as characters that have much higher murder scheme chances than other characters, and access to powerful agents that, if hired, reduce their reward but increase their chances. This means that the lone wolf assassins make more money than any other, but may find themselves having trouble actually pulling off the kills. The assassins have a leader, like other societies, and this leader gets a few bonuses within the society. First off, they can call in other assassins and agents for murder schemes without having to split the money from a contract, and they even get a small cut of all contracts, even if they don't help in them. The leader is a lifetime position, which is chosen based on who has obtained the most money for contracts once the previous leader dies. Essentially, the highest earner is the heir presumptive, and when the leader dies, that heir takes over until they die. This does in fact mean that ambitious assassins may seek to assassinate the assassin leader to free that position up, making the society particularly tumultuous. The benefits and drawbacks of a realm that has this society are relatively obvious. Murder is much more frequent with the society around, and characters with targets on their back and no spy master really ought to watch out. Of course, if you're looking to get a lot of killing done and you have money, then it can be a great benefit for you. There's not much more to assassins. Basically, as a non-assassin, if you discover a member, there you're in to either becoming an assassin or to hiring them. The big reason why you'd want to hire them is that if they fail to kill someone or they are discovered in doing so, it is much less likely that you'll be exposed as the killer. As well, they can kill targets which might seem extremely difficult for your character to do themselves. Assassins are mostly useless for a high intrigue character who can do their own killing, but for less competent characters they can be a strong alternative to self-led plots. Let's discuss in detail one last society before summing things up and going over a few more things that apply to all societies. One last secret society would be, of course, the Devil Worshippers. We all knew it was coming, and we all knew they had to make an appearance. These people revel in sin and seek to undermine religious authorities wherever they find themselves. Devil worshippers are a little different in CK3 compared to CK2 though. I've heard that the developers of CK3 have wanted to avoid a lot of the supernatural elements of the game and focus their efforts on more grounded things. So let's take these devil worshippers and reform them into something a little more down to earth. Characters in this society seek to lessen the power that religious authorities have over the realm and to lead lords and ladies away from the faith they believe in. They do this because they'd like to infiltrate the religious authorities with their own people who can reap the benefits that those authorities for themselves. The big goal for this society is to drive out any genuine religious authority so that they can become the new religious authority, whether that's through murder, shame, or genuinely rising the ranks as crypto devil worshippers. As more and more members of the clergy become devil worshippers, the powers and abilities of the devil worshippers increase, with the ultimate end goal of society being to create a new faith with access to special tenets only available to faiths created in this way. If a Catholic realm, for example, were to be overwhelmed to the point that devil worshippers take control, then the leader of devil worshippers can create a new faith. The tenets for these sorts of faiths would provide unique bonuses and radically alter the virtuous traits of the faith. The goal would be extremely hard to pull off and essentially require devil worshippers to completely control every temple and religious position in the realm for an extended period of time. This is where balancing comes in, where maybe you want to change the actual requirements. That's up to the developers to do in their QA time. It may be possible that a character could become the court chaplain, but they need to keep their cover for long enough in order to sufficiently control the realm. As well, all zealous lords and ladies have to be expunged from the realm, presumably. The leader of the society is the one who gets to actually decide the specifics of the new faith, and leadership is determined by who in the society has the least piety and fervor. This essentially means becoming leader of the society is a race to the bottom, and can be difficult to live in a realm that persecutes sinners, but obtaining that power could be worth it for some lords. Besides getting to decide the tenets of the faith, the leader also has the complete loyalty of all devil worshippers society members, gaining a strong hook on all of them no matter their position in the realm. The leader can be overtaken if someone with less piety challenges them to a duel and wins. These duels are non-lethal, and previous leaders can reclaim their position as their piety decreases more and more. Members of the devil worshippers can intentionally decrease their piety in the normal ways in the game, as well as having access to various actions to decrease their piety at the risk of exposing themselves. Members essentially work to decrease their piety as quickly as possible without actually getting exposed as members of society of the realm. Members essentially work to decrease their piety as quickly as possible without actually getting exposed as members of the society to the realm. Some of these intentional actions include sacrificing prisoners, defacing temples, building monuments and shrines, or recruiting other people into the realm to the society. The only restriction on people who can join the society is that they cannot have any virtuous traits. If they obtain a virtuous trait, whether that be through converting or an event that gives them one, they'll be given the opportunity to renounce that trait or to leave the society peacefully. A former member of the society will know all the members of it, but cannot really risk revealing how they got the information without also throwing themselves under the bus, as well as invoking the wrath of the society itself. So it's kind of a mutually assured destruction situation if you leave. The benefits for members of the society are the opportunity to climb the ladder and become leader, nabbing those strong hooks and protections. This society is a blight upon its realm, generally speaking, in that a monarch will often find that if there are many devil worshippers around, they will be more loyal to their cult than to the realm. That being said, if the entire realm is happy to embrace the cult, it might work out well for them. Just watch out for all the holy wars coming your way once you convert. So that's the adaptation for devil worshippers from CK2 to CK3. I think the system makes them more grounded in reality with a little bit of crazy wacky outcomes through the ability to make a new faith. It should be difficult enough to make the new faith that it only happens extremely rarely, but easy enough that even an AI could do it with the right luck and skill. Also, we're rapidly approaching the end of this section of societies, and I've got to say, I'm pretty happy with it. The possibilities for societies are immense, and I think if done right, could really shoot the game into the greatest of all time position. This DLC about societies I dub the Societies DLC. Please, calm the applause. I know I'm great at naming things. Thank you. Please. This DLC would focus entirely on the one mechanic, societies, and it would be easy to expand upon it with DLC with smaller flavor packs that add in specific new societies. So that's societies. To me, this DLC is great because it contributes heavily to the uniqueness of each realm and each character's role in it. Imagine a Byzantine Empire with 5 societies that segregate all the lords into little factions, along with lords who aren't part of any of the 5 societies. Some of them are good for the realm, some bad, but all interesting and unique nonetheless. Obviously, like any DLC, it is true that eventually each society will get old. You can create your devil worshipper society or your fashionista society over and over again, and it will create some interesting stories and drama, but at the end of the day, the luster wears thin. The staying power of these societies is how they radically alter the political makeup of their realms. They add challenge and contextual decision making to the game. If I, as an emperor, know that a lot of my realm is part of a fashionista society, I know I need to keep my court grandeur higher than I would need to otherwise. If I know there is an assassin society around, I know to make sure I always have bodyguards, and so on. Regardless of societies losing their luster for the player, they do alter the way the game is played meaningfully and dynamically so that there won't be a complete loss of interest for many hundreds if not thousands of hours. What the societies and the treaties and the realm laws and all the mechanics I brought up in this video contribute to the game is complexity, which is quite the double-edged sword. Let's finish up this video by talking about my design philosophy for these DLCs, which you might have been able to decide for yourself as we went. Nonetheless, let me lie to elucidate it for you. DLCs are additions to the game, which anyone has access to. No one has to use, but everything has to face the consequences of. What I mean by that is that you can opt to never join a single society, but the AI will do it, and them doing so will affect the game. In this way, every DLC is felt, but not always directly. This is the way that makes the most sense for keeping players from feeling overwhelmed without making the DLCs feel inconsequential. Every mechanic brought forth by a DLC is an additional tool to the toolbox, but not every project needs every tool. This is the comparison I'm going for. More tools means bigger and more complex projects, but it shouldn't be the case that every project needs them all. At the same time, it's also important that the new tools aren't simply new ways to build the same projects. With each new tool set, there should also be a few new blueprints to work on. Building the same house with different tools is fun, but some new projects would be nice too. I expanded that more, but I think the imagery does a good enough job. So far, CK3 has actually done an okay job of providing interesting blueprints. Hit or miss for sure. Special focus on the Iberian struggle, which did a great job of making strong incentives that I generally wanted to get. The only problem with Fate of Iberia was that the tools to get those rewards were kind of unwieldy and frustrating at a time to use. Adding the struggle was always felt janky, it didn't feel right, you know? Northern Lords had a bit of the opposite problem. The tools it provided were absolutely amazing, but the decisions were mostly lacking. Elevating the Kingdom of Man in the Isles was, to be honest, a meme at best. It was fun the first time, then it became a trip to becoming overpowered immediately. Other things like founding the King of the Roos were pretty underwhelming, and the Rangians were pretty much a non-entity. Send a guy away, he comes back, maybe, with money and prestige and a unique trait. Pretty whatever, to be honest. Royal Court flopped pretty hard on that issue, with only the Baleo Tyrrhenian Sea decision coming to mind. That decision was pretty meh, and was entirely broken at first until it was nerfed. Now it's even less interesting, albeit not game-breaking. What this tells me is that Paradox has the right idea, but simply has missed the shot, only barely on each DLC. Northern Lords got the highest praise, so that tells me that it's more about the tools than the blueprints. This makes sense given that the game is mostly a sandbox after all. And so voila, my philosophy of design for CK3. Provide first and foremost tools. These tools exist and are not forced on anyone's throat. They are accessible to the AI and they influence the world of even those that do not use them. That being said, every once in a while it's important to shake up the game a little bit. For example, the mechanic for paying homage that I mentioned all the way back in the video is put onto all players. This is acceptable because that mechanic is an innovation on an already present one. I would say in these sorts of cases, and these sorts of cases only, that there can be a DLC that fundamentally alters the game. We can't do it too much though, otherwise it gets old. Secondly, DLC should provide objectives that utilize those tools in a non-invasive way. A couple new decisions, some new modifiers to gain, some new Dynasty legacies, and some new achievements. These sorts of things extend the lifetime of a DLC, although they certainly couldn't make up for a poorly done set of mechanics. I genuinely believe that if Paradox follows this philosophy, they can turn CK3's fate around. It's not too late to avoid the rocks for this Titanic of a series, but some steering better happen fast before it's too late. Obviously what I'm proposing is not so simple as just implemented Paradox, but I'm speaking as an extremely experienced player in this franchise and other Paradox franchises. I also believe that, as an experienced player, I know a lot about what makes these games fun. I've been playing the Crusader Kings franchise for soon to be half of my life. I first picked up this game after watching Northern Lion play the Old Gods expansion in 2013, and I fell in love. I know this game well, and I've been around for its development over the years. My ideas are not vague whateverisms talking about fixing the game or adding banal features that would get old fast, which is something I often see on Reddit or in Paradox forum posts. These notes I've given in the video refer to specific mechanics and DLCs with themes and actions that the player base can evaluate themselves. If you're watching this far, first of all, like and subscribe and look at my Patreon, look below. And second of all, comment what you think about my ideas here. I'm open to discussion, genuinely, and I will fight to back up my ideas. My ideas are not some fantasies that don't involve monetization. I put together these ideas with the intention that Paradox would make these full expansions, and I left space for there to be flavor packs and event packs or whatever Paradox wants to add, so that these DLCs can themselves be platforms for more DLC. I think it's entirely acceptable that Paradox want money for their work, and I'm happy to pay if these DLCs can be substantive enough. I don't believe developing a minimum of 2 major mechanics for each DLC is excessive, nor do I think adding a few achievements, decisions, and events would be. If every DLC featured 2 major mechanics, 10 new decisions, 20 achievements, and let's say 40 flavor events, I think that would be completely reasonable. Along with it comes a free update, like usual, which adds 1 new mechanic available to all players, and maybe 10 to 20 flavor events. Throw in 2 or 3 interesting decisions on top, and you've got yourself a healthy DLC, alongside a new update to get players playing while they decide if they want the DLC. These are my standards. If it's too much, tell me. If not enough, I respectfully disagree. Obviously, more content is good, but Paradox also can't overwork its employees. Give them a reasonable job to do and they'll give us good DLC. In that, I trust. For now, that's going to mark the end of this video. It was a long and difficult video to make. Many nights were spent mulling over these ideas and much thought went into constructing the brass tacks of these ideas. I take pride in my ability to express specifics of what I want without being emotional about it. I know it's easy to get upset at Paradox or what we as players perceive to be low effort cash grabs. I won't lie. Friends and Foes was a little bit insulting after Royal Court's reception. I'm not so entitled that I would indignantly tell Paradox to just do better. If anyone from Paradox sees this, here's how you can fix it, at least in my eyes. If I'm wrong, I'll sink with the ship, and if I'm right, feel free to steal every idea here. I just want a great video game to play. Thank you for your time.